Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. As you guys can see, we're in the shop today and we're going to be working on the Corvette yet again. So today's video, I think, is going to be part 4 of our Haltech ECU swap, the wire harness swap from the 2005 to 2011, and everything else that we've got to do with this conversion. And currently I'm standing in a spot where a bunch of parts used to be. There's still a couple down here, but those parts that were occupying the space for the last couple months were actually the dry sup tank and the engine harness. You guys saw us modify those to get those installed in previous, I think, video number 1. Yeah, I think video number 1 was the engine bay. Video number 2 was the interior. Video number 3 was the seats. This will be the 4th video, kind of like we said. And what I've gone ahead and done is started the install. The dry sump tank is permanently installed. I tightened all that down. The engine harness is in. You guys can actually see kind of the bottom of the harness, the silver part there, the silver part over there. That's the heat protection. That will run underneath the block and basically below the heads and the headers. So that's gonna be the knock sensor, the crank position sensor, the starter, all that stuff. So kind of just been playing around with getting that put in. I have not connected the ABS pump. That wiring is, I still need to basically run it down underneath the steering rack and up. We'll get to that once I get the car back on the lift. But yeah, I just wanted to show you that we have made some progress and we're actually almost ready to put the new fuse box, because I think we had mentioned we had to upgrade to a 2011 and newer fuse box. So we need to get that put into place. And we're almost ready to install that fuse box, but there's a couple things I need to finish up before we do that. One was, I had a concern in the first video about this engine wiring harness, about the chassis harness not potentially matching up with everything in here. As far as I can tell, everything's gonna plug right in. I haven't seen any differences between the fuse box or anything like that. There's no additional harnesses that need to be plugged in. I thought I'd found a plug on the engine harness, this little red one right here, but I went and looked at my 2005 harness, and that was actually just another junction between the interior and the engine harness. So that should all plug in because those are from the same car. But like I said, that front one, I'm not finding any missing plugs. I'm not finding anything random that's missing. Everything looks like it's gonna work. So there are these junctions between the harnesses, basically this connection right here. One is colored orange, one is colored green. Now, those all plugged into each other. Now, I'll be honest, I think those are just additional connections between the interior harness and the engine harness. I don't remember seeing one of those connect to the chassis harness. So the last update I'm going to have for the engine bay is actually going to be this pink and orange wire right here. You guys can see there's 2 of them. Well, basically what this is the factory recall for the dead headlights. The C6s had some wiring issue, geez, like 10, 15 years ago, and there was actually a recall for the headlights failing. It wasn't the headlight, it was something in the fuse boxes where I don't know if they got hot or whatever, but basically they bypassed it from the engine harness to the chassis harness instead of going through the fuse box. So all we've got to do really is strip those 2 ends, connect together, and we'll have the recall fixed. Obviously, we're doing it ourselves like 15 years after that recall, but, you know, so that is going to be that headlight recall fix right there. The transmission harness is still in here, the 2005 one. It's above the bell housing, it's underneath the engine harness. And that is still in there because basically we're going to have to remove the torque tube and the transaxle. And we're going to drop that out because there's a number of things that we've got to do back here. So you guys will remember I have new hubs to put back here. So that's one reason. And another thing is they actually changed the spline count that goes into the hubs. And what they did with that was they went from 28 or 31 spline, I can't remember, to 33 spline. So our rear axles will not work. I already have one axle. I ordered it a while ago. It was actually the ZR1 rear axle on the passenger side. The driver's side, unfortunately, has been discontinued for a super long time, and it's basically made of unobtainium. So I think what we're gonna have to do is basically run 2 passenger side ZR1 axles. See, the reason they're different is because on the ZR1s, they ran a thicker in diameter axle on the driver's side and they ran the standard size on the passenger side. Well, 10 plus years ago, that was a big mod a lot of people did, was they actually grabbed 2 of those 01 axles and put them on both sides. Now there is aftermarket axles that you guys could put in that are 33 spline, but the problem with those is they're over $2,000. I think it was $2,100 last time I looked. So I'm like, yeah, no, until we break one, I will go ahead and go with a used axle. I saw the passenger side axle going for like $50 or $60. So we'll go with that before we go spend $2,000. So the hubs and the axles is the main reason we're gonna drop the transaxle. Another thing is we gotta get under here and basically unplug the fuel tank on the driver's side and the passenger side. I may even have to go in here and change the wire harness and the fuel vat purge solenoid, basically that solenoid that plugs up front. There is a tank in the back that you basically have to unplug. I don't know if the 2005 or the 2011s are the same. I actually have a used one here already. It came basically with the harness. It was, I think, 30, 40 bucks for the whole kit. So I was like, yeah, let's just go with that. So, all right, guys, one of our parts has come in for the motor. So this isn't really part 4 related, but it is related to the project. And what we have here is a crank hub for the LS9 ATI part number 916107. And basically what this is the dry sump version of the crank hub for the LS9. I currently have the wet sump. That one is actually over here. And the main difference between the wet sump and the dry sump LS9 application is going to be the overall length. You guys can see that this is relatively short. And when we compare the dry sump to the wet sump, you guys will see the wet sump is a bunch longer, and you guys can see that's going into the motor. And the reason the dry sump is shorter is actually because the crank is longer. So basically that space that you're trying to make up, the wet sump application, this specialized pulley, basically adds, I don't know, an inch or 2 on the end of the standard LS9 crank hub, and that allows it to slide into the motor and basically line up your LS9 accessory drive with an LS2 or LS3 crank. Of course, this is the wet sump version. So to save some money, not have to buy an entire new pulley assembly, all I did was order the LS9 standard dry sump crank hub, and that will slide into the back of our ATI harmonic balancer. Now this is a 14% harmonic balancer that we had on the LS3 wet sump. The balancer part is the same. Like I said, the difference is basically on this crank hub. So this crank hub was about $100 shipped. And if I remember correctly, that outer harmonic balancer is between like $300 to $500. So it is pretty expensive. So if you guys are kind of upgrading along the way like we are, just buy the parts that you need. And in our case, we'll have a 14% overdrive harmonic balancer pulley with the LS9 hub on our new 427. And if you guys did notice in the background, we do have the Corvette up on the lift, back in its natural home, as some of my friends have called it. Basically, we've got the car in the air so that we could start pulling out the transaxle and the torque tube like we talked about earlier. And one of our parts just came in, and that is going to be a shifter rebuild kit from Texas Driveline Performance. I think it's TDP. They do a lot of T56 and TR6060 stuff. And they've got some specialized Corvette parts. And what this is basically a billet end link replacement on the shifter arm. So you guys will know that there's a shifter arm between the shifter assembly and the transmission that's in the back. It goes in the transmission tunnel, the torque tube tunnel, whatever you want to call it. Then it kind of hops up and goes into the top of the transmission, and that's where one end bolts in. Then the other end, like I said, is plugged into the back of the shifter. So this will basically replace both of the OEM sloppy end links, as they say. I actually happen to have an extra shift arm. It's actually what came with the transaxle that's in the car now, the Z06 diff and transmission. This came with that, but I never installed it. I just kept the one that was in the car, and kind of like I was talking about, these billet end links will replace these ones right here, which over time are known to break down. And if you guys can see, there's like plastic inside of it. So these are fairly weak from the factory, and these new ones are supposed to be an upgrade from Texas Driveline Performance. So I actually do have almost breaking news for the Corvette. I was able to find a driver's side rear ZR1 axle, and I actually found it on eBay. So the auction had the old GM part number listed, and I started looking it up, and I couldn't find it. And then eventually I went to GM, like GM Parts Director or whatever. I don't do business with that company, by the way. That's Flo Chevrolet out of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I don't do business through them normally, but I went to their website, typed in that part number. The current part number for the ZR1 axle popped up. And then down in the details of the current part number, it actually said, you know, this part number replaced this part number. So I was able to find an older ZR1 axle, and that is on its way. And the company on eBay was actually asking $199 for the axle. I countered offered with $150. They counter offered back at $189, so I got $10 off. That basically paid for the taxes. So we'll have a new to me ZR1 axle on the way, so that should be here in a couple days. I actually do have a quick shop update, and what that is, that's going to be the Max Jacks lift. We've had a first failure on this thing in probably, I don't know, 5 or 10 years, something like that. And basically what happened was, when I was lifting up the Corvette, this hose right here started pissing transmission fluid out of it. Luckily, I had this bucket down here, and it caught most of it. I got a little bit on the wall, but mostly it ended up down here in this coolant bucket that I've got. And yeah, so I was not aware we're going to have a hydraulic hose failure. So basically, I need to find a replacement for this hose, because what happened is, you guys can see this fitting right here. It was actually squirting out the top of that fitting. So I think the rubber hose has failed somewhere above this crimp. So I need to find a local hydraulic shop and get that replaced. All right, guys, quick update on the transaxle drop. Basically, one of our parts that came in, this is the main one. This is the C6 ZR1 driver side rear axle. And you guys can see how thick this driver side axle is. That axle is probably another at least ½ inch thicker than these OEM axles. But yeah, that actually came in relatively quickly. We ordered it, I think, on Friday or Saturday of last week. They shipped it Monday, and then it got here from Michigan and North Carolina in just a couple days. It got here on Wednesday. So that's kind of the missing piece that we've been waiting for this transaxle swap. And then down here under the car, you'll see a couple pieces. We got the plate for the torque tube removed. So that's basically the thing that goes between the driver's side and the passenger side. And then you can also see our exhaust. We got that dropped down. Now, if you look way back there, you'll still see the mufflers hanging down. But yeah, so that is the quick update. And unfortunately, that took a couple hours to get everything out of there. So yeah, we are slowly working our way, getting our way back there. I also started disconnecting some of the electrical for the rear harness. And I'll be honest, guys, it does look like we're gonna have to drop the entire transaxle, because the wiring I know is already different. I looked at some of the plugs between the harness that I can see and some of the harness that we have for the 2009 Plus. Yeah, some of that stuff's different, and we want to make sure everything plugs in. So we are doing the right thing by dropping the transaxle. So what we got to do next is basically take the wheels off, disconnect the rest of the electrical. We got to disconnect the e-brake, because there's two cables that run through the transaxle basically, and then shoot to the left and right that go to each rear axle. Disconnect all that. We're also going to take the calipers and the rotors off. We might just hang the calipers, but we definitely want to take the rotors off, because those carbon ceramic rear discs are really expensive, and the way we're going to drop the transaxle, we don't want to risk breaking those by those hitting the floor or hitting the concrete or anything like that. So we're going to disassemble the rear brakes. Oh, and if you missed the truck update video, I did go ahead and get this line replaced on the Max Jacks lift. I think we'd mentioned that in this video, that, you know, this was broken, trying to squirt. Well, if you hear it, it is opening and it's lifting the Corvette up. So we have replaced that, like I said in the previous video, that truck video. I just don't know if everyone saw that. And so yeah, the Max Jacks is fixed and fully operational. All right, guys, we've made a bunch of progress. You guys won't be able to tell much of a difference here. So if you guys look down there way by the floor, you can actually see the slave cylinder end. So that's been disconnected. The speed bleeder hose, that braided stainless steel line, that's been disconnected. Also, I pulled out the wideband O2 sensor because I really don't need it. When we go to the Rebel LS, it comes with its own wideband. So we're going to take that one out and save some wiring. So we've removed that. And then back here, you guys can see the brakes have been removed. The driver's side is the same. Disconnected the upper control arm, disconnected the coil over in the back, so I took the two bolts out there. We disconnected the e-brake. You guys actually can see them right there, those two springs with the cord on the end. Disconnected to remove the e-brake because that kind of feeds through the subframe, and that will actually remain with the car. So you guys want to make sure you get that removed. But yeah, this side's pretty much done, ready to go. We've also disconnected all the electronics. And also, if you guys can see the pan underneath the car, that is transmission fluid. So hopefully when we pull the transmission out and pull it backwards, that thing stays empty and we don't get fluid everywhere. And also here in the front, you'll see another pan, so you'll see that we're draining the transmission cooler lines as well. So yeah, that's pretty much all the systems disconnected in the car. There is two more things we need to go over. One is going to be this box of shelf end caps from Closet Made. We're actually going to take these and stick them over the end of the brake hard line at the very back of the subframe. There's a little vertical section like this where there's two lines that you need to disconnect. I found that these basically will seal that shut and you won't have to worry about brake fluid dripping everywhere because this will probably be out of the car for a couple days. You basically take these small shelf caps, put it right over the hard line with the flared brake fitting, just squeeze it on there, and that'll basically close it and seal it up. So I discovered this years ago and I had realized that I am all out. So I went to Lowe's or Home Depot, wherever it was, and we picked up some more. And then the last piece is actually going to be the McLeod clutch. So this is a RXT 1200. I've actually gone ahead and made the decision that we're going to go ahead and send that out. I just sent a form into McLeod. They will get back to me with, I think it's an RMA, basically a return merchandise authorization. So we're not really returning anything. We're basically just sending this in to get serviced. So they will skin the flywheel. I think they'll replace both clutch disc as well as maybe the sensor. And their service, it's like $600, something like that. So in the end, I just looked up the price of these. The price of these clutches, it's about $1,400, $1,400 to $1,500. I got this clutch kit for $400 shipped like forever ago. I think it's been at least 5 or 7 years, something like that. And this rebuild will be basically about $600. So in the end, you know, I will have about $1,000 into this clutch kit, and you know, it's been in the car for like 5 or 6 years. That ain't a bad deal when brand new, this kit is like $1,500. Now, if I had spent $1,500 and then had to send it in to get serviced, yeah, that gets kind of pricey, but I've been pretty happy with this so far, and it made 800 wheel with no issue. You know, we want to make sure our clutch is good to go. So that's one thing. I'm going to send that in to get serviced. And speaking of the master and slave cylinders, right now, while it's all apart, while there's no engine in here, I think we'll have the most room we'll ever have to go ahead if we want to upgrade those. It's best to do it now. So, you know, we kind of fought the master cylinder when we swapped out the pedal box for the ZR1 unit. So, yeah, we're going to have to mess with that a little bit, but that should slide right out. And the slave cylinder, all this is just a factory GM kit with the TIC Performance billet bridge or brace that's inside of there. That's really all that we've had, and that's actually the OEM master cylinder from 2005. I've had no issues with it, but I'm just kind of like, it's a part, it's kind of a pain in the butt to get to, and you know, if we want to do it, we want to do that now. So we're going to be basically upgrading those with the TIC Performance adjustable master cylinder, and I don't think their slave cylinder is adjustable, but yeah, we'll be replacing both of those parts with the TIC Performance unit. Alright, as you can see, we got the transaxle out of the car. Really just pulled it out so that we could do some work back here. What we're going to do is we're going to reseal this reverse lockout cylinder like we were telling you about. We're going to pop the torque tube off a little bit. We're not going to take it off the whole way. We're just going to move it up a couple inches, push that locking pin out and pull the shifter mechanism out, that we could redo those bushings like we told you about earlier. And then we're also going to run the harness, the new one, the new transmission harness for the 2009 and newer, along the torque tube, put it in transmission, the diff, all that, and make sure everything plugs in. All right, guys, we've split the torque tube from the transmission. You'll see that here in a second, but we have the shift cable here in a vise, and I have cut off the protective heat shrink that was on both ends. So we are ready to punch this out, use our hole punch that out. Same thing over here, cut the protective sleeve on it, punch this hole out, and we'll go ahead and replace it with the part from Texas Driveline Performance. We have our new shifter bushings on here from Texas Driveline on both ends. This is gonna be the shifter side, this is gonna be the transmission side. And you guys can see there is a little bit of difference between the heat shrink tubing. I actually screwed this one up on this side, and this side is what came with it. The stuff that I have definitely is way better quality than the kind of crappy stuff that they have. I mean, not a big complaint, but you know, that is just something you could improve upon if you've got some better heat shrink tubing. Use your own. All right, guys, we have gotten everything that we can on the transaxle done. We have put the new wire harness on there. So the wire harness from the 2009 and newer is on there. You guys can see that fresh RTV, we took that apart. That's pretty simple. Just pull the 4 bolts off, put the RTV on there, and then simply put it back together. Everything else, we got the torque tube attached to the front of the transmission again. You can see our shifter cable has been upgraded with the new end. So this end right here, and then there's an end inside the torque tube. And that's going to be it for tonight. Unfortunately, due to the time change, they just rolled back the clock so an hour this weekend. We are now an hour darker than it was yesterday. So now it's going to get dark at like 5:30 instead of like 6:30 or later. And so yeah, that is where we're going to wrap up tonight. We're going to have to do the hubs and the axles tomorrow. All right, guys, we're here with another evening because of the time change. You guys can see we have our new hub installed right here. That is going to be the driver's side rear. And you'll also see that I have the new to me ZR1 driver's side axle installed. Here is the factory axle. If you guys can see the difference between the two, you definitely can tell the OEM axle here on the left, actually it's the C5 axle, looks like someone skipped leg day. So yeah, this swap wasn't too bad. All we really had to do was disconnect the outer tie rod for the rear. So disconnect that, disconnect the lower ball joint, drop that out. I removed the caliper, the brake hose, and the hub and the spindle as an assembly. I just took this whole assembly, put a blanket under it so we don't screw up the caliper. We just removed the 3 T55 torque screws in the back. Those are pretty big. They take red Loctite, so remove those. There's also 2 15mm bolts. They're right here holding in the e-brake cable. Remove those, and this whole e-brake shoe and the hub basically fell out. And really the only thing you got to pay attention when you're putting it back together is the e-brake cable. So this bracket back here and the ABS little sensor thing, you just got to make sure that those are lined up basically, and also make sure you put your sensor to the top, at least align it with these two. That way you guys can put your ABS sensor onto this bracket, and then just reassemble everything, put the lower ball joint back together, put the outer steering rod, well, the rear trailing arm rod, put that back together, and the passenger will be exactly the same. We got to swap the hub, swap the axle, take everything off as an assembly like we said, finish that up, put it back together, and that will be it for the rear transaxle upgrades. And then we're going to continue on the wiring. All right, guys, you'll notice that the transaxle is back up under the car. It's not on the ground anymore. Yes, I still have the transmission jack under there, but it's honestly just sitting there at this point. I have pretty much reassembled the driver's side. We didn't really run into any issues on this side. This side's pretty much good to go. I just need to put everything back on the rotor, tighten all the suspension bolts, and we'll be good there. And over here on the passenger side, we've got a similar situation. You can see our new ZR1 axle right there. You can see our brand new hub from Chevrolet. That's in there. And everything's pretty much good to go. Now, with that being said, we do have a ball joint that is spinning just inside of the socket that it's basically sitting in. And that's the passenger side rear. So unfortunately, I think we're gonna have to pull that lower control arm and that spindle. Right now, I was trying to tighten it down, and I got it to like, I don't know, 1/4 inch down. And then the whole assembly just started to spin when I was trying to tighten that nut. You could try to put a vice grip under there, but I think that is a bad ball joint if it's just spinning inside the cup. You know, that should not spin like that and should allow you to tighten it down. Maybe the threads got messed up. I'm just not entirely sure, but yeah, so that side I'm kind of just gonna not put back together right now. And to be honest, we're not really in a rush anyway. We got the transaxle back in the car, and we do have that on a jack stand. You guys can see the US General or Pittsburgh. I don't know what brand that is. It's Harbor Freight. But yeah, you can see the bell housing, torque tube, everything's sitting there just fine. So if we have to wait a week for that part to get in and us install it, that's not a bigger deal. I'll be honest, guys, the motor hasn't even been started. Plus, I'm waiting for Black Friday. There's a couple parts from Texas Performance I want to buy. And yeah, so I need to get that stuff on order. The discovery that I made last night is basically going to allow us to wrap up this entire wiring swap. But as of right now, I have the 2011 interior harness, the engine harness, the transmission harness. I have the 2005 chassis harness, so up front, and basically all the fuel system in the back. And the discovery that I made last night that's allowing us to end this video early is basically this pigtail right here. This is the harness that plugs from the transmission up until the fuel system, the fuel purge solenoid, that system, and basically everything that's sitting there above the fuel tank. And the reason we don't have to drop the fuel tank or anything is because this pinout, I looked, it's exactly the same between the 2005 and the 2011. I even double checked. All of the wires are in the same spot. They're all the same color. And you guys see that missing pin right there? Same identical on the 2011 harness as well. And so because that system is all the same, I think we're going to be fine on the fuel side. And I have more evidence to back that up. It's due to the fact that many years ago, when I installed the Edelbrock E4 supercharger, like dang near 10 years ago, they only sold you a, I think it was a 2008 or 2009 Z06 fuel pump. Now, basically, that Z06 fuel pump is the same one that they used in the LS3 Grand Sports. So basically what this harness came out of. And I did no wiring updates for that. All I did was put that fuel pump in. I plugged in the harness on the top. We were good to go. There was no adapters. There's no changes in that fuel system. And with that pigtail being exactly the same between the 2005 and the 2011, I've come to the conclusion that the wiring, the chassis wiring that's for the fuel tank, the, like I said, the fuel purge system, and the passenger side and driver side fuel tanks, those upper harnesses, are exactly the same. So now I will say this, if we had a ZR1, that is all completely separate because that fuel system has its own fuel pressure control module. So I think they just call it FPCM, something like that. But yeah, so there's actually a computer for that that sits in the rear tub on the driver's side. I picked up a 2009 Plus harness a while ago, and when I went to go plug that in, I was actually plugging it into the 2005 harness, not the 2011 harness from the interior. So we will need to swap that stock 2005 harness for the 2009 Plus harness. And so yeah, by ending this video, we have finally finished up this wire harness swap. Like I said, it's been many videos and it's been a long time, but it is what it is. And it's time we start putting power to some of these things and seeing what works, what doesn't work. And we'll just go from there. And also that rear suspension stuff, I'll get that tightened off camera. You guys have seen me swap this drivetrain probably 2 or 3 times at this point. And suspension work. We actually did a whole video about that. You know what? I'll include a link to that video up above because that was a like 45-minute video that we did a few years ago. And yeah, so that's gonna be it. If you guys like this video, hit that like button. If you want to follow for more updates on the Corvette, specifically that 427, we should be getting updates on that. I think he should be starting machining on that soon, so we'll get you some updates on that. Hit that subscribe button, turn your bell notifications on. If you guys want to help support the channel, check out all the links down below. We'll include links to some of the parts and everything that we used today. And also make sure you check out our website, BonecrrusherSS.com. Any of these used parts that we've taken off go up on there. Also, we've got parts for Chevy SS. We got stickers, merch, and all that good stuff. Any support that you can give there goes right back into the channel, these projects, the shop, the truck, and the Corvette, and all that good stuff. So that's going to be it. Thanks, guys. Have a great one.